The first thing I noticed when I woke up was the silence. Not peaceful silence either. Not the soft, cozy kind you get in a nice cabin with coffee brewing and somebody you trust humming in the kitchen. Nah, this was the dead kind. The kind that presses against your ears until you realize something is wrong. I was flat on my back on an old leather couch, wrapped in two scratchy blankets that smelled like dust and cedar. The fire in the stone fireplace had burned down to a red glow. My stomach felt like somebody had run a hot zipper straight through it, which honestly wasn't far off. 3 days earlier, I'd had emergency surgery after my appendix burst on a Tuesday night in downtown Portland. The doctor told me I needed bed rest, meds on schedule, and somebody around in case the fever came back. Somebody around. I turned my head toward the kitchen and called out, "Nate?" Nothing. A weird little chill slid down my spine. My husband had been there an hour ago. I remembered him handing me crackers, helping me sip water, acting all sweet and careful like husband of the year. He'd even kissed my forehead and told me to get more sleep. I pushed myself upright with a gasp. Bad idea. Pain ripped through my stomach so fast I saw spots. "Damn it," I hissed. I waited for the wave to pass, then looked around the room. My overnight bag sat by the front door. My coat was missing. So were Nate's boots. I glanced at the side table. My phone wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe I'd dropped it. I checked under the blanket, between the couch cushions, on the floor. Then panic started creeping in, slow and icy. No. I braced myself on the couch and stood. My legs were shaking hard, but I made it to the kitchen. The cabin was small, just one bedroom, one bathroom, and a living room that opened into a narrow cooking space. Snow piled high against the back windows. Outside was nothing but pine trees, white sky, and miles of empty land. This place belonged to Nate's uncle once. Now it was just an off-grid box in the middle of nowhere, tucked deep in the mountains of eastern Oregon. Cute for a weekend, not cute when you're half stitched together and can barely stand upright. I checked the counter. No phone, no truck keys, no purse. Then I saw the note. It was folded beside the sink, written on one of those yellow legal pads Nate used for work. My fingers were numb when I picked it up. "Lila, you'll be okay here for a few days. There's soup, bottled water, and wood stacked out back. I need time to think, and honestly, so do you. Don't try to come after me. By the time you read this, I'll be long gone. I moved the money this morning. The joint account is empty. I left enough cash in the drawer for basics. This marriage has been over for a while. I just didn't know how to say it. Don't make this uglier than it has to be." I read it twice, then a third time. By the end, my whole body was trembling so hard I had to grip the edge of the sink to stay upright. Not from the cold, not from the pain, from the fact that this man had smiled in my face, tucked me in, waited until I could barely walk, and then cleaned out our money and left me in a snowed-in cabin like I was some problem he could dump and drive away from. For 1 second, I thought I might pass out. Then I opened the junk drawer. Inside, under a pack of dead batteries and a restaurant receipt, was a roll of cash. $40. I let out a laugh so sharp it didn't even sound human. Nate thought $40 and canned soup would hold me over while he vanished with my savings, my phone, and whatever little soul he had left. What he didn't know was this. I had a secret he'd never figured out, and the second I caught my breath, I was going to use it. He thought he left a broken woman in the snow. What he really left behind was the one person who knew exactly how to ruin him. $40. $40 damn dollars. I laughed again, louder this time, and to the walls of the cabin bounced back my madness like some echo of revenge. I dropped onto the couch, hugging my knees, and tried to plan. First, I needed warmth. The fire had fizzled to red embers, barely enough to keep the chill off my bones. I remembered the stack of firewood outside. Nate had been meticulous like that, always neat, always trying to look like he cared. Funny how neat stacks of wood suddenly seemed like a lifeline. I pulled on the wool socks from my overnight bag and limped toward the back door. Snow crunched underfoot, a crisp, biting sound that stung my ears. I had no jacket, no gloves, but hell, I had $40 and a fire to restart. That had to be enough. Dragging the stack inside, I set it near the fireplace and knelt down to poke at the embers. Sparks flew, dusted my face, but it didn't matter. I coaxed the fire back, whispering encouragement like some old witch with a grudge. Soon, flames licked the logs, crackling and hissing, filling the cabin with heat and smoke and a promise. Next came food. Nate had left some cans in the cupboard, beans, soup, mystery chili with a label I didn't recognize. $40 wouldn't buy gourmet, but it could buy me a pack of instant noodles at the general store 30 miles down the road. I ate slowly, savoring each bite like it was a victory. Then I remembered the note. Nate needed time to think, huh? More like time to run away with everything we'd worked for. My stomach churned, but anger did something wonderful. It sharpened my brain, made me feel alive. I couldn't just sit here and stew in betrayal. I had to move, had to figure out exactly how to handle the guy who thought he could ghost me and get away clean. I checked the back window. Snowstorm incoming. Great. Perfect weather for him to hide, but also perfect weather for me to disappear if I needed to. I laughed again, half hysteria, half relief. The mountain didn't care about Nate. It didn't care about me either. It cared about survival, about smart moves and fast thinking. I took stock. One couch, one fire, $40, a few cans, and a mountain of snow that could either bury me or shield me. Then my mind started ticking. He underestimated me. Always had. Underestimated my stubborn streak, my ability to fight, my refusal to just curl up and cry. Nate didn't know that what I lacked in strength right now, I made up for in patience and planning. By the time the sun started peeking through gray clouds, I had a new perspective. $40, a warm fire, and sheer determination were enough to survive today, but survival alone wouldn't be enough. Nate would pay, somehow. I sank back onto the couch, letting the fire warm my bruised body, and a slow, dark smile crept across my face. I didn't just survive. I was getting ready to strike back. He thought he vanished into the snow. What he didn't know was I was already 2 steps ahead, and the first move was just about to begin. By mid-morning, I was moving like a predator. Not literally. My stomach still ached and my legs felt like lead, but mentally, I was sharp. Every creak of the cabin, every whisper of wind through the pines, I heard. Nate had made a mistake thinking I'd be helpless. First order of business, find out where he went. The driveway was covered in fresh snow, and sure enough, faint tire tracks led toward the main road. I traced them, boots crunching on the powder, squinting at the sun reflecting off white like some kind of frozen mirror. Whoever he thought he hadn't disappeared clean. He had left breadcrumbs. $40 in my pocket, I had 2 options: wait here and stew, or follow the tracks. Following seemed better. Maybe dumb, maybe reckless, but hell, recklessness had always been my friend when survival and revenge collided. The wind whipped my hair across my face, slicing like thin knives. I hugged my coat tighter, felt the bite of the cold, and gritted my teeth. Each step forward was painful, but each step reminded me I was alive, pissed off, and unwilling to play the victim. The tracks led to a small parking area, a pull-off Nate used when he wanted to explore the mountains or sneak into town without anyone noticing. There, half buried in snow, was the truck, Nate's truck. My heart thumped like crazy. I crouched behind a tree, peering through branches. No one in sight, no driver, just the tires sinking slightly in the powder, a trail fading toward the highway. I smirked. He'd made it easy, or maybe too easy. Either way, I had options. I could wait for him to return, I could sneak in and check for clues, or I could start walking toward the highway and hitch a ride. Each choice carried risk. Each choice carried potential. I crouched a little longer, scanning the area. My mind ran through everything I knew about Nate, patterns, habits, favorite haunts. I knew he'd stop at some diner or gas station. He couldn't resist coffee and cigarettes. Predictable, stupid, and lucky for me. I exhaled. Patience was key. I wasn't going to rush, not yet. My advantage was the element of surprise. He thought he was free. He thought I was stranded. He was wrong, dead wrong. I backed away slowly, keeping the truck in view, and retreated to the cabin. I had to rest, had to strategize. $40 wouldn't last forever, and snowstorms could get vicious out here, but I had enough to make my move, soon. The sun climbed higher, melting some of the snow into slick patches. I kept my eyes on the tracks through the window, imagining Nate's smug face, thinking he'd outsmarted me. Little did he know, I wasn't just thinking, I was planning, and every plan needed patience, timing, and a little bit of audacity. By the time the wind shifted and the shadows grew long, I had a new sense of control. The snow might have slowed me down, but it hadn't broken me. If anything, it sharpened me. I was ready for the next step, and Nate wouldn't see it coming. He drove off thinking he'd escaped, but by the time he reaches the diner, he's about to find out that being underestimated comes with consequences. By late afternoon, I had the cabin warmed up, my stomach mostly settled, and my mind running at full speed. The plan was simple in theory, messy in practice. Nate liked to think he was slick, but he had one fatal flaw. He underestimated me. Big mistake. I grabbed my coat, jammed my wallet with the $40 into my pocket, and slid my boots back on. I didn't bother with gloves. The cold bit, sure, but nothing could bite harder than the rage simmering inside me. I wasn't just following him, I was hunting him. The highway wasn't far, just a 3-mile trek through thick woods and a partially plowed snow road. I kept my eyes peeled for footprints, tire marks, anything that gave me a hint. The air smelled like wet pine and diesel, sharp and alive. Every crunch underfoot felt like a countdown. Finally, I reached the diner Nate always hit when he thought no one was around. The place was small, neon buzzing open over the door, steam fogging the windows. I pressed against the cold brick wall and peered in. Yep, there he was, slouched in a corner booth, coffee in hand, cigarette smoke curling around his head like a halo for a sinner. Smug, thinking he'd pulled a fast one. I grinned. Patience, timing, audacity. He had no clue. I slipped inside, acting casual, like I was just another weary traveler escaping the snow. The smell of fried food, cheap syrup, and diesel heat filled my lungs. Perfect cover. I kept my eyes on him while I moved to the counter. "Coffee, black, and some pie," I said, keeping my voice low but loud enough to be heard. The waitress nodded, distracted by the tip I left in cash. $40 wasn't much, but it bought me leverage in small ways. I slid onto a stool near the window, keeping the booth in sight. Nate looked up briefly, spotted me, and froze. That was priceless. The smirk that had carried him through the mountains faltered. For a second, just a second, he realized the game had changed. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting it warm me from the inside, letting the tension build. He kept glancing over, twitching, unsure. He hadn't expected me to follow, hadn't expected me to find him. The waitress brought the pie, and I pretended to dig in, but my eyes never left him. Each bite was calculated, each sip measured. Patience. I let the moment stretch, let him squirm. Then I pulled out my phone. Not mine, the one I'd hidden back at the cabin, but I had a plan for that too. Nate's first mistake was leaving me in the snow. Second mistake was thinking I'd be helpless without my phone. I tapped the screen, sent a message to a number he would immediately recognize, one that would guarantee chaos in his little perfect life. Just a teaser, something small but enough to get his head spinning. He froze, coffee halfway to his lips, eyes widening. Panic started creeping in. The smirk was gone. That's when I knew the first domino had fallen. He thought the snow had buried our lives, but the real storm was only just hitting, and it had my name written all over it. Nate's hands shook. That much was obvious. Coffee sloshed dangerously close to the rim of his mug, but he didn't notice. His head was spinning, eyes darting like a kid caught sneaking candy. I had never seen him so exposed, so human, and damn, it felt good. I pretended to dig into my pie again, fork scraping the plate. Casual, relaxed, just another stranger in a snowbound diner, but every fiber of my body was electric with control. I had the upper hand now, and he knew it. The phone buzzed in my pocket, another message I'd prepped while he was distracted with coffee. One small ping could undo everything he thought he had built in those years. Nate's gaze flicked toward me every time I tapped the screen, every time I pretended to scroll, and I swear I could see the panic creeping in like wildfire. He always underestimated me. Always. Thought I'd freeze in fear, thought I'd curl up in some cabin and wait for him to finish his disappearing act. But I didn't just survive. I adapted. I learned. I waited. And now I was rewriting the rules. The waitress came by to refill my coffee. I smiled, tipped her generously, and leaned back. Nate's hand twitched. He wanted to say something, but no words came out. He was trapped in the moment, watching the calm before the storm, unsure which way it was going to hit. I had a choice. Confront him here, make a scene, let the other diners watch his ego crumble, or play it smart. Smart won, always. The storm I was brewing didn't need an audience. It needed precision. I let my eyes wander over the diner as if I were scanning for something random. The jukebox in the corner played some old rock tune, crackling through the speakers. Steam curled from the radiator vents like lazy ghosts. And Nate sat there, sweating under my casual stare, realizing that the little bubbles of control he thought he had were popping, one by one. Then I slid the phone onto the table, just enough for him to notice. His breath hitched. The text on the screen wasn't incriminating yet, not really, but it was enough to make him sweat, enough to make him wonder who else knew what he'd done, where he'd gone, and how little time he had before it all caught up. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the warmth, savoring the fear I could taste on him. He had thought a snowstorm could bury the truth. He had thought I was out of reach. But truth has a way of finding you. And right now, Nate's about to learn that the mountain doesn't forgive. And neither do I. The diner's bell jingled behind me as I stepped back outside, letting the cold slap my cheeks. The sun had dropped low, turning the snow into this blinding white glare that hurt my eyes, but I didn't care. I had a mission now, and nothing was going to slow me down. Nate had gone quiet inside. That's what I loved. The guy thrived on control, on swagger, on thinking he was untouchable. Take that away, and suddenly he was just a dude in a booth, sweating, staring at his coffee like it owed him an explanation. I dug my hands into my coat pockets, feeling the $40 like a lifeline. It wasn't just money, it was leverage, fuel for the next move. I'd make sure he felt the sting of every dumb choice he'd made, every lie, every betrayal. The tracks in the snow led back to the highway, and I followed them at a brisk pace, boots crunching. My body ached, sure, but my mind was sharp. This was more than revenge, it was justice, and I'd been planning for 3 days in a snowed-in cabin while he thought I was curled up and defeated. I caught sight of his truck about a mile ahead, parked at the roadside like it had been abandoned, and for a moment I hesitated. Not because I was scared, hell, I wasn't scared, but because I wanted to savor the moment. Nate had underestimated me, and I wanted him to feel that. I ducked behind a tree and watched. He was pacing like a caged animal, muttering under his breath. The phone he'd left buzzing in the diner? He hadn't realized I had backup. I wasn't just reacting, I was orchestrating, laying the pieces where I wanted them. I remembered the cash hidden in my pocket, the prepaid gas station card I'd swiped from the cabin stash, and the GPS coordinates Nate had bragged about last summer when he thought he was showing off. Everything aligned. All the advantage was mine if I played it right. The wind picked up, carrying snowflakes sideways like shards of glass. My hair whipped across my face, and I wiped it away, grinning. He had thought he could outrun me. He had thought he could ghost me, but the mountain had no mercy, and neither did I. I slipped closer, boots crunching softly, careful to stay out of sight. Each step was measured. Every sound I made was deliberate. I wasn't just approaching, I was announcing my presence without announcing it. Finally, I stopped behind a rise, looking down at the truck. Nate had stopped pacing, frozen mid-step, probably realizing he was being watched. I held my breath, savoring the second it hit him, the primal, gut-level fear of being outplayed. The cold bit harder now, but it didn't matter. Every nerve was alive, every sense dialed to 11, and I knew one thing for sure. Tonight wasn't about snow, or cold, or even $40. It was about showing Nate that no one walks away unscathed when they think they can screw someone over and vanish. He thought the roads would hide him. He thought the cold would protect him. But the only thing waiting for him now was me, and I don't forgive. The night had settled hard, cold pressing in from every direction, but I didn't feel it. Not really. My focus was all on him, Nate, frozen in the headlights of his own stupidity. He hadn't expected anyone to track him down, and that hesitation was gold, pure, unfiltered advantage. I crouched behind a snowbank just past the rise, boots sinking into powder, hands gripping my coat. My chest was pounding, heart like a drum in my ears, but it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. It was the rush of being alive, of finally flipping the script. He turned in circles, muttering under his breath, and I could see the panic creeping into his face. The truck's engine was off, but I knew he was debating something, whether to leave, to call someone, to run again. None of it mattered. He was in my territory now. Every move he made could be anticipated, manipulated, controlled. I took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the snowbank. Crunch. The sound was soft but deliberate. Nate's head snapped up, eyes wide, and for a split second his mouth opened and closed like he was trying to figure out if I was real or some hallucination brought on by the cold. "Lila?" His voice cracked, half disbelief, half hope. I didn't answer. I just kept walking toward him, slow, steady, deliberate. Every step let him feel the fear, the power shifting. His hands twitched near his coat pockets, probably thinking about his phone, his cash, or whatever dumb tricks he had planned. You followed me," he stammered. "You bet I did," I said, voice low, calm, dangerous. "Thought you could ghost me, huh? Thought the snow could cover your tracks? That was cute." He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow, a sound that had no place in the mountains, no place in the cold night. He backed up toward the truck, eyes darting, looking for escape, but every angle I could take, I was already there first. "You don't understand, Lila. Save it." I cut him off. "I've been trapped, cold, pissed, and hungry. You left me in the snow like I was nothing. Now it's my turn." He opened his mouth again, maybe to argue, maybe to charm, but I could see the hesitation. The truth was hitting him like a snowball to the face. He wasn't in control anymore. Not here, not now, not ever again. I circled him slowly, boots crunching over fresh powder, letting the shadows play over his frozen face. Every word, every movement was calculated. He flinched at my gaze, flinched at my presence, flinched at the storm that was me, rising from the snow like something he couldn't anticipate. "You thought you'd win," I said softly, "but all you did was light a fuse." Nate swallowed hard. His ego, once untouchable, was crumbling right in front of me, and I smiled, dark and slow. I didn't need to yell, didn't need to strike. The fear, the panic, the regret, that was enough for now. He thought he had the last move, but in the mountains, in the cold, with the snow at our feet, the game was just getting started, and I wasn't playing by his rules. The wind had picked up, slicing across the mountains like a blade, but I didn't flinch. Nate, on the other hand, looked like he might melt into the snow any second. His hands were frozen near his pockets, fingers twitching. His eyes darted like he was calculating every possible escape route. Too bad for him, I'd thought of all of them first. "You really think you're slick, huh?" I said, circling him slowly, letting each word hit like ice in his chest. "You think $40 in a note would end it? That I'd just curl up and die in a cabin?" He swallowed, jaw tight, trying to muster something, an excuse, an apology, maybe a charm, but it didn't matter. Words were useless here. Actions mattered. And my actions were clear. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. I stopped a few feet from him, letting the snow crunch loud in the quiet night. His truck, parked half buried, was a useless safety blanket. He couldn't drive away, couldn't hide, couldn't call for backup without leaving a trail. And I had all the time in the world. "You left me," I said, voice calm but loaded. "Left me in the snow with nothing but cold and fury. Thought that was the end. But guess what? That's when it started, the real game. And buddy, I always win my games." His shoulders slumped slightly, the first crack in his ego. Good. I smiled, letting it linger, not because I hated him, well, maybe a little, but because the power shift was beautiful. Watching him crumble, knowing he'd underestimated me, that's what made this worth it. I dug in my coat pocket and pulled out the small stack of cash I'd kept hidden, flashed it just enough for him to see. $40 might not buy a fancy dinner, but it bought leverage, bought my sanity back, bought me this moment. You think you can hide, Nate. You think the mountains, the snow, even the night itself could cover up your mess, I asked. Nah, you've got nowhere to run, and you've got no one to blame but yourself. He tried to step back toward the truck, but I subtly shifted, blocking him. Not aggressive, just deliberate. Every movement calculated, every step reinforced the fact I had control now. The snow started falling heavier, fat flakes drifting down like lazy ghosts. Perfect. The storm wasn't just outside, it was in me, and Nate could feel it. I could see in his eyes regret, fear, panic. The smug, untouchable Nate had evaporated, replaced by someone who realized too late that the rules had changed, that someone who'd been trapped, left cold and angry, could rise from the snow like a storm himself. I took a slow step closer, letting the crunch of snow echo. You wanted time to think, huh? I said, softly. Well, I thought too, and now it's my turn to decide how this ends. Nate's lips parted, maybe to speak, maybe to beg. I didn't wait. Not yet. The mountain had a rhythm, the snow had a rhythm, and I had mine. He thought the storm outside was the worst part. He had no idea the real blizzard, the one with me in it, was only just beginning. The snowstorm had grown wild, whipping around the mountains like it owned the night. But I didn't care. The cold didn't matter. The wind didn't matter. Nate, slouched against the side of his truck, sweat freezing on his forehead, mattered. And finally, it was time to finish this. You really thought you could ghost me, Nate, I said, stepping closer through the drifted snow, boots crunching like gunshots in the quiet. Thought I'd just sit back and let you take everything. Nah, buddy, not my style. His eyes flicked around, desperate, panic-stricken. The bravado he'd worn for years was gone. He realized too late that every move he'd made to escape, every step, every lie had been anticipated. And I'd been patient, smart, and ruthless. You left me cold, broke, and alone, I continued, voice calm but icy. I could have melted down, lost it, called every cop in the county. But I didn't. I waited. I watched. And now? I pulled out my phone and pressed send. Not a threat, not even a call, just a single message, one little ping, enough to send him scrambling, unsure who knew what, and scared out of his mind. He swallowed hard, eyes wide, realizing that the dominoes I'd set in motion weren't stopping. Not now, not ever. You thought you had the last move, I said, circling him slowly, but you don't. I do. Every choice, every path, every single one of them, you're trapped in my game now. He opened his mouth, probably to beg, probably to plead, but nothing came out. I didn't wait. I didn't need to. The fear, the panic, the chaos, he carried it all himself. I just let it sink in, thick as the snow around us. I backed away, letting him stew in the aftermath, letting him feel every ounce of the reckoning he'd run from. Then I turned, boots crunching in the fresh drift, fire in my chest, freedom in my step. The mountains stretched out ahead, cold but clean, and I felt unstoppable. This wasn't just revenge. This was survival. This was proof that no one walks away from betrayal without paying the price. And I was the storm. I glanced back once, just enough for him to see, and smiled darkly, not cruelly, just knowingly. And then I disappeared into the snow, every step carrying me further from the wreckage he'd made and closer to the life I'd fought to reclaim. The snow swallowed me. The mountains kept their secrets. But one thing was clear. Nate would never forget this night, and neither would anyone else foolish enough to underestimate me. If you loved watching this twist of revenge and survival, hit that like button, smash subscribe for more gripping stories, and drop a comment telling me what you'd do if you were in Leela's shoes. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss the next story that keeps you on the edge of your seat.